Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for the briefing, and hopefully you can do stakeouts sometimes in the future when you brief the Council. It'd be helpful to get as news is happening. I wanted to ask you about one of the proposed projects in the report about equipment, about night vision goggles, and it also talked about equipment to stop IEDs. And I'd heard, for example, in the Mali mission, that there's big disparities in what equipment different contingents have. That the Europeans, for example, deploy with goggles, drones, a variety of self-protective equipment that is not available to the others that are there. And I'm wondering, as head of DPKO, do you think that's acceptable? Is there some way to sort of not necessarily bring down the level of security of the European troops, but to somehow bring up what's being done to bring up the level of security of the troops there? And in terms of human rights vetting, I wanted to know, just as one example, you know, there's more than 1,000 Cameroonian peacekeepers that you have, and I'm sure many of them are you know, perfectly vetted and fine. But in the last year, there have been attacks in the Anglophone areas of burning down of whole towns. I mean, the last weekend, an entire town was burned down by the Cameroonian army. And I'm just wondering, what's the speed with which DPKO figures out which units are involved in what seem to be human rights abuses and ensures that they're not deployed, you know, to spread these activities to, for example, the CAR? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. When it comes to equipment, I mean, first of all, we absolutely need to have all our contingent equipped, particularly with these kind of life-saving equipment. And this is something on which we're already working a lot. In Mali, we have a great cooperation with UNMAS. And working with UNMAS, we have managed to reduce significantly the fatal incidents resulting from IEDs. And it has to do with equipment, but it doesn't have to do only with equipment. It has to do very much also with how it is being used. In other words, you can have a very good vehicle and device to blow up mines, you know, before they blow you out. But at the same time, you have to use it properly. You have to make sure that if you have I'm sorry, I'm going into the detail just for you to understand. Well, if we have an armored car, you know, APCs, you have to be in it and not on it, and you have to have your safety belt and your helmet. And if you do that, then the chances that you will be killed as a result of the mine is much lower. And we saw that recently. We had a number of mine incidents in Mali over the last couple of weeks. And fortunately, we only had 2 light injuries. I mentioned that to the Security Council the other day. So these mitigating measures, together with making sure that contingents have the right equipment, can really save lives. Now, in terms of the vetting procedures, this is something that we take very seriously. And I think we vet like 8,000 people a month. We're happy to give you the exact figure, but that's how much it is. And there are certain countries with human rights issues or issues in the past where we have special attention. It takes more time, so we factor that in when we are, you know, potentially about to deploy contingents from these countries. At the same time, we want to make sure that you know, whenever we deploy a contingent, they have the proper vetting. And if it takes extra work, you know, sort of more detailed work on specific units or on specific countries, then we do it.
Just one follow-up on that, on the vetting, because I'd heard, for example, Sri Lanka seems to be a country that had some issues in the past, and they're now participating in peacekeeping. But I'd heard basically that it was one person in Geneva trying to see whether those who were being deployed were on the units that took action in northern Sri Lanka, and it didn't seem to be, many people there didn't feel that that's a big enough vetting. I mean, just in terms of staffing, how big is the staffing, and do you need more? Thanks.
Yeah, well, I don't know, frankly, what's the staffing in Geneva or GHR. What I do know is that in that particular case, that the vetting takes much more time than it usually takes. So we're doing it. Maybe we could do it more rapidly if we had more staff. I agree with this, but you know, we want to make sure again that in the end those units that will be deployed will be vetted properly.